All right, so back inside of Photoshop, let's go ahead and finish the rest of it. So at any rate, I'm not going to bother to remove the spill on this right now. Everybody already know, everybody's good on how to do that part, right? Do we need to look at that really fast? Yes, okay, we'll look at that really fast. Let's just zoom in. We're not going to do it all over, but we can do it in this area that's sitting right up here in her hair that's right up here. I've got a lot of that green that's actually showing through here. I have my virgin copy of this image sitting right down here that's protected, it's locked, it's not going to go anywhere. So the move that I'm going to do now is destructive, but again, if it all goes to hell, I've still got the virgin copy that's sitting down here. So I'm going to be willing to actually work on this image and destroy this image to fix the spill problem. So to do that, you need to actually select the image part of the layer. So it's, again, the little white brackets are around the image part. Hit the B key to get a brush. Change your brush from the hardness on your brush to a completely soft brush. You want to bring it all the way down so it's totally soft. You leave your opacity at 100% and your flow at 100%, but we are going to change your drop-down menu from normal down to color. And what color does is it now will actually paint on my image. It will respect the luminosity of my image, but it will change the color. So to see what that means, I want to pick the hair color right now. You can see my foreground color is white. If I were to paint with white right now, it would come out as a gray on this image. To change the foreground color, you could come over here and actually click on it and then come up here with your color picker and pick a color of hair and say OK. That seems to be way too involved and takes too much time. Instead, the shortcut to do that is simply hold down your Option key and you temporarily get the color picker. You can see I'm going to come down here over her skin tone and click on that, and now I've got a flesh color that's actually picked in there. But I am going to go back and actually select hair color, and you can see if you paint on the skin that it's not changing the luminosity, it's only changing the color. So that's what we are going to use to leverage to get rid of this spill. I'm going to Command Z to undo that because I'm not trying to remove stuff on her skin. I am still on the paste board though, so if I actually go to a little bit larger brush, you see that I can get well outside of my image right here to work in slowly, because the areas that we want to paint, you only want to remove the spill where it is. You do not want to paint, you do not want to change the hair color that's up here in the front that doesn't have spill, because what will happen is it'll make everything one solid color. Now you'll still have the luminosity, but so it'll still look like hair, but it looks fake. It looks like it's synthetic hair because it's all one color. There's no variation in it. So you don't want to use this tool anywhere that you don't actually have to use it. So I'm actually going to make my brush a little bit smaller, and I'm going to simply start up here in this area, and I'm simply going to drag it down to paint through her hair. As I get down here, I'm going to hold down my Option key to sample another color. I'm just trying to change my spill removal color so that it's not always the exact same color, because that becomes obvious as well. As I get down into this part down in here, it's actually further back behind, so it's a little bit darker. When you get close to her ear, you need to make it a hard brush instead, otherwise you'll actually spray that spill removal out onto her skin tone, and that would not be correct. So now I'm at a completely hard brush right now, so I can do this line that's running right down the side of her, right there. And again, I'm not going to do everything else, but that's how you actually remove the spill. And if you take a look at this, it does a really pretty fair job of it. Now, again, I don't personally think that this is the best way to make this selection, but it actually does a pretty good job of it. Are we good?
I have a question.
Shoot.
Mine is sampling it, but it's not sampling the color of the person.
Let me see. Usually what that would indicate, my guess, is that, do you have the mask selected instead of the image? Okay, you got the image selected. Oh yeah, that is actually really weird, isn't it? And it's not reselecting, it's not changing your foreground color. Like, come over and sample this guy right here. None of that changed. It's actually sampling your background color.
Oh, if I do that, will it change?
No, actually, I think this is going to be a Photoshop restart on that, because that's not working the way it should work. So again, come up here like a really dark color, hold down the Option key and sample that. It shows that change, but it's not happening here. So I'm going to call that out as a Photoshop need to reset preferences. It's really easy to do, but we'll just do that as soon as we break for lunch, okay? So just remind me. Okay, so a better way to go about doing this, well, we'll see if it's a better way. I'm going to turn off this layer. I'm going to turn off the solid color layer. And again, I'm simply going to double click on the hand to kick back out. So we're actually working now on the background, the original layer. I've turned everybody else off because I want to actually use color range on this to go ahead and sample this out and see how that works. So to use color range, you come up to the select menu and you come down to color range. In this case, we actually have two options that we could try. One of them in the drop-down menu is you could actually just pick greens. And this ends up being very similar to how we use zero selective color. It's just that with zero selective color, we have the benefit of having a hue saturation layer that will boost the green saturation of this image up and become more effective. So I'm not going to use this one here because, again, the zero selective color version of this is better, but I am going to use the sampled color. So I've just picked the sample color up here. I'm going to kick my image to the side. If you want your preview, so the preview that's in the little window right here, I actually prefer to have the big version of that so that my image itself looks exactly like this does here. To do that, you use this drop-down menu right here, and instead of having your image set to none, you actually set it to grayscale, and then these two things will mirror each other. So it just gives you a bigger version of this preview window. I've got, by default, this little first eyedropper is selected, and if I click right in the middle of her forehead, it's now just sampled a color of her skin. If I change, I'm going to come up here to the highlight on her skin right now. If I click on that guy, you'll see that, like all selection tools, or most, not all, but most of them, it does not add to the selection. Instead, it makes a brand new selection. So you can see that where what was selected before is no longer selected, and I've simply changed it right now. If you want to add to a selection, you've got to click on the second eyedropper over, the one that's got the little plus on it. And now I can come back and click on more of her skin, and you can see I can continue to work my way around her skin by simply clicking on areas and actually adding to it, and I'm making the area larger and larger and larger. When you come over to a certain part over here, you'll see that some parts of the shadow will start to pick up parts of her hair, but that's basically the way the tool works. If you selected something that you didn't want selected, so for instance, I don't want this hair that's up here that's actually been selected, you click on the minus eyedropper, and then you can come up to here in an area like here, and you can actually click on this, and it'll actually remove those areas from your selection. You can click and drag across, although my click and drag across does not seem to be working in this version of Photoshop. The fuzziness slider will actually expand or contract how, basically what that selection's doing. So that's basically the way the tools in this work. Nobody works with localized color clusters, so you don't need to worry about that. What that really does is it would restrict your, let's say for instance you were trying to only select the green in this lower right hand corner. If you clicked on it, it would target this area stronger than it would target the very same green somewhere else in your image, and I have no idea why anybody would want to use that. But at any rate, I'm going to go back to the original targeting adjustment tool, the first of the eyedroppers, and I'm simply going to click on the area of green that's actually sitting down here at the bottom. Then I am going to click on the plus eyedropper tool to see if I can't pick up a little bit more of this contamination. So I just clicked and drag across there. You'll see that there's green that's sitting up here in the top that's got a lot of contamination in it as well. I'm going to click on that area, and you can see it's continuing to add to my selection. There's a small area down here that I'm going to click to add to that guy as well. And then I'm going to use my fuzziness slider to try to expand this, because again, I know that there's areas of transparency that should be in this hair right in here that I'm not seeing. So I'm pushing this forward, my fuzziness, to try to select more of that area that's in here that should actually be showing through. I'm going to zoom into this area as well. So again, just holding down the space bar and the command key, I temporarily get the magnifying glass so that I can see and hear what's really going on to make sure that my fuzziness slider is doing what I want it to do. Because again, if I come in here like this, I get too aggressive about it, I start to lose all the hair, all the really fine hair that's actually sitting back in here. I think this is about as good as this is going to get. You do have, so I'm going to just say okay to this. And then again, I've now got an active selection going. I think I've lost all this really fine hair in here, so I don't think it's going to be that great. But we'll see. Up to the select menu and down to save selection, and we're going to call this color range. and say okay, Command D to deselect, and then we can go take a look at color range. And this is the thing that we actually just made. So I'm going to zip back out and take a look at it. And it's not going to be the worst mask in the world. Again, there's probably a refining edge that I would need to do in here. I still have my path on here, so I could still load this as a selection, which I'll do right now. Command click loads that as a selection, up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather. And again, there's that little bit of collar that's right in there that is a part of this selection. So the B key to get a brush. Sorry, go ahead and do a 1 pixel radius. The B key to get a brush, make sure it's normal, 100% opacity, 100% flow. You don't really need to worry about the edge of it because the selection is restricting me to that. And hit the X key so that I paint that area with black. And then again, I'm going to invert my selection up to the select menu, do the inverse of this guy, make white my foreground color, and clean up that edge that's right on the side, those little stray hairs. And, you know, I mean, basically, you guys get where this is going. Command D to deselect, and we'll see how this layer actually works. So back to my layers palette, I'm going to copy my background layer. I'm going to drag it up above everybody. So I'm taking it all the way to the top. Again, I'm going to come back and find the color range knockout that I just made. Command click loads that as a selection. Back here to my color range copy and click on add layer mask. And I'm going to turn on my solid color white layer that's on the bottom, the visibility. Again, the mask needs to be inverted. Command I, and you can sort of see how you did. And in this way, we can kind of compare things. Again, if you want to see the difference in what these look like, the quality of the mask, come over to your history palette and click on your the little camera. The first one we need to name is color range. Then turn color range off and turn on your channels mask and do another snapshot, and we'll call this channels. And say okay. The little camera that's sitting right at the bottom of history. Are you not getting that dialog opening up? When you click on it, do you get this dialog? Okay, got it. So then anyway, if you go to the very top of your history palette, you can see right up here, that's what color range is, and that's what channels. And the channels has got a whole lot of fine hair in it. It's a whole lot better. The color range to me is a hack. So that's those two. We're going to do the last one really quickly. To do the last one, do you guys still have your 0 selective color action or no? Does anybody in here not have that action? Okay, then we're going to make it again really quick. To make that action, click on your action palette right here. Finally, click on the little menu part that's just to the right of it. It'll open up a menu. You want to say new action, and you want to name that action 0 selective color. I'm going to do mine number 78 because I've probably got 78 of these. And go ahead and hit record. Over in your layers palette, I'm just my top layer is actually selected. I want you to add a hue saturation layer. And then I want you to come right back to the add another adjustment layer, and the other adjustment layer I want you to add is selective color. In your properties palette up here at selective color, reds will be active by default. You want to pick the black slider only and drag it all the way to the right. You just filled all of the reds in your image with 100% black ink. Come down to the yellows and do the exact same move, black slider only. We just filled the yellows with 100% black ink. Come down to the greens and do the very same move. We just filled the greens with 100% black ink. Come down to the cyans, do the same thing all the way over. This is why you make this thing in action, because I hate doing this. Down to the blues and do the same thing, drag it all the way over. Down to the magentas, same thing, drag it all the way over. Down to the whites and drag it all the way over. Down to the neutrals and drag it all the way over. And then finally the blacks and drag it all the way over. Now your image should be black. If it's not black, if it looks like sort of a solarized thing, it's this radio button at the very bottom. You want to make sure that absolute is checked, and that's the action that we wanted to build. Come back over to your actions palette now and click on the little square button, and that will actually stop the recording. And then to make sure your action actually did work, throw away the selective color layer and throw away the hue saturation layer and come back over to your actions palette. Make sure that the action is selected, not the last step of it, but the action itself, that zero selective color, and then simply click on the arrow that's pointing to the right. It will run the action. And again, in this case, if you end up with something that is looking solarized like this, it is because the radio button is selected to relative, not absolute. So you want to select on absolute to make sure that that guy is actually selected. Now, I'm temporarily going to turn these two guys off because I don't want my solid color on. You need to actually be doing this again. I'm all the way down now. I've selected my original background layer. Then you can turn on the eyeball for hue saturation and the eyeball for selective color. Go ahead and click on selective color because we need to change one of the properties in this. So both my adjustment layers, hue and saturation and selective color, are both turned on. Selective color is the top one. It is the active layer. In your drop-down menu, go back up to greens, and in the greens, take your black slider all the way from the right all the way over to the left. And now what you've told Photoshop to do is, instead of filling the greens with black, which is 100% black ink, I want you to fill this with a minus 100% black, which is actually white ink. So this gets things pretty good here, but you can see in a perfect world I would have a black figure and a white background. I don't have that here, and the reason I don't have that is because the green color that she's on right here is extremely impure. It's not a really good saturated color. So to fix that, or to help me along, select the hue saturation layer that's underneath. This is why this is a better method than using just the predetermined green that was in the color range. This is what you get if you pick that. But in our case, because we've actually got a hue saturation layer here to help us out, you can click on the targeting adjustment tool that's up at the top. This will automatically pick the green for you. Watch what happens to my screen. Right now, you'll see that I've got master is selected here, but using the targeting adjustment tool and clicking, it automatically changes this to green and selects the green range that I'm actually in on my image right here. Now you simply click, hold your mouse down, you get the double-headed arrow on the hand. If you drag to your right, you actually saturate the green. If you drag to your left, you desaturate it. When you completely desaturate it, your whole image goes black again because there is no green left in your image. That has now been turned into a gray. So again, I'm going to crank an image all the way to the right. Now you can see that it's helped out some, but it's not perfect here still yet. But what you need to worry about here is that if you have really serious spill in your figure, when you do this move to saturate, you can actually take little strands of hair and push them to white as well. You'll see this starts to glow. One of the, when we did that full figure image in our last class, the blonde girl that was full length that was on the green background, remember we could push that saturation too far and part of her hair actually started to go white, which means it's not going to be a part of the mask. Again, we need that part to stay black. So in this case, you can do the full saturation part because that hasn't caused a problem for us. So in this case now, I'm going to come over to my channels palette. If you go to the very top of your channels palette and you click on the RGB, I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can actually see this. I'm going to click on the RGB and then I'm going to click on the red channel, and you'll notice if you go back and forth between the two that the red channel is just a hair lighter in the background than the RGB guy is. It's not much, but it's enough to be valuable to us. So instead of copying the RGB guy, I'm going to copy the red channel. To do that, simply click the red channel and drag it down to the dog-eared guy at the bottom. Double click on that name and we're going to call this zero selective color. And then we've already got points that are already dropped down. Our control points are already sitting right here. We don't need to add new ones to that. They're the same ones that we used before, but take a look at what's going on. In the before version of this, when we were doing this, I had RGB values here that were all the same because we were dealing with a grayscale. We were dealing with this, you know, we've got this channel is selected, but these numbers are wildly different. Like if you look at my number 2 point right here, it's like a 0 and a 208. I mean, it's just completely off. It's not telling me what I think it should be. And the reason that is that because I've got an adjustment layer is selected. Look in my layers palette. The adjustment layer is the selected and active one. these numbers are reflecting what's going on in this mask right here. So that's not really helping me at all. Scroll down to the bottom of this and select your background layer, and you will see that these numbers then do correspond to what you think they should be. So again, I'm working on my zero selective color channel right here. I do have these numbers that are sitting right here. I am going to hit levels on this. Command L brings up the levels dialog box. The black point is already there. The figure itself is actually already dark. I just need to move the white slider. I'm going to start to kick it back. And again, I'm watching my numbers right up here. I get to a 252. I go to my arrow keys. I got to 255. Recheck to make sure it didn't change your black point. In my case, it didn't. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And then right off the bat, I've got something to see. I didn't have to do any brush work on this. I didn't have to do any of that shit. So I'm going to see how it works. I'm going to come back to my layers palette. I am going to scroll to the top first of my channels palette. Actually, I've still got my the two adjustment layers are still on. You can actually not only turn them off, you can throw them away. You don't need them anymore. They've done everything that they were meant to do, so you don't need to keep them. Some people will leave them in place, but you've got the action. You can make them again really fast. So again, I'm going to make a copy of my background layer. I'm going to drag it all the way up to the very top. I'm going to double click on it and call it zero selective color. And say OK to that. I'm going to scroll to the bottom of my image and command click to load the zero selective color channel. Back up to the layer that's got that and add that as a layer mask. Again, the layer mask needs to be inverted. Command I inverts this. And then finally, I'm going to come down here, turn off the other layer that was on, and turn on my solid color layer. And this is my zero selective color mask. And you can see how much quicker we got. It's a much finer mask. It's a great looking mask, whatever. And how long did that take us? No brush work, no painting, no overlay brush, no blah, 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 blah. Are we good on this? Questions about this? So again, you would remove the spill from this. We have an issue that's right down here. And since I wanted to address this issue that's right down here, we might as well. It's a good thing that we can actually get through right now. We will try to do this part right now. So, yeah. So I have a problem down here, and it's not just spill. If you take a look, so does everybody have an image that's close to this, that's got this really hard green edge on it? Do you guys all have a copy of this? Can you get one really quickly? Actually, let's do this. Let's do this. We can do this on a different image. We can do it on a different image, and you'll all have this image. So I need everybody, I got to find it first, but I need everybody to I tell you what, I'll find this during lunch, and this is where we'll start when we come back to lunch, because I don't want to keep spending your time simply looking through this stuff. So I wasn't planning on actually getting to that far today into this. So really quickly, today is going to be about retouching. So we're going to start, just one second. Oh, the whole ethics discussion that we were supposed to have today was actually scheduled to happen on Wednesday, so you still have a couple days to read through that stuff, and I'm going to ask everybody to please read through that stuff, and we'll go from there. Oh, this will actually be a good one for you guys, and it'll be a good way to introduce what I'm actually trying to introduce here. So I need everybody to go to, I'm going to say it's in our week number 6. Sorry guys, the way this class works is my numbering system changes. Yeah, so what you need to do is you actually need to go to week number 9, class number 9. So I'm looking for class 9 files under the student files right here. For all of you film scanning people, I'm getting ready to change your life right now. And there is an image in here that's actually called dustremoval.psd. If you could double click on that guy to open this up into Photoshop. If you'll come to the pasteboard just like this. It'll come out onto the pasteboard. I actually want to get rid of that other image. So to get rid of that other image, I need to get back to the little, the stoplight figures that are up on the top. Hit the F key once, you go to the black pasteboard. Hit the F key again, you go to the normal pasteboard, and then you can click on this image that's in the background. If you didn't do that homework and turn it in, save this file and turn it in, at least you'll get credit for it being late. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and close that up. You don't need to save that. But I'm going to double click on the hand here, and this is actually a film scan. And so if you come up to the very top left-hand corner, you can actually see the problems that we've actually got up here. So it's not only got dust on it, but it's actually got a scratch in it. I mean, it's a really awful piece of, yeah, whatever. So when you guys actually do your film scanning, do you run into dust problems? It's always a problem, right? How do you get rid of it? Everybody goes in with a spot healing tool, whatever, and you do that shit one at a time, right? And it's awful, right? I mean, if you had $1 for every minute you spent doing that, you would have enough, to actually pay off your student. Anyway, so I'm going to show you a way that I actually get rid of dust, and it's a more sort of a wholesale thing. I think it's actually a better method, whatever, but you guys can decide on this. But it employs a couple of things that we haven't really talked about in this class yet, and so that's kind of what I want to do. So I want you guys to do this with me. The first thing we're going to do is actually make a copy of this layer. So again, I'm over in the layers palette, and I'm simply going to click on the drop-down menu and make a copy of this layer. Again, if you're like the way Jenny does hers, she simply has that original background layer selected. She hits Command-J. Command-J, if you have a selection going, will jump a selection to a new layer. It's like a copy and paste. But if you don't have a selection going, it simply copies the entire layer. So it's same thing. So then what we need to do in this case right here is we need to come over to our history palette. Actually, let me see the way I can actually, we'll leave this part over here. We're gonna come over to our history palette. I wanna make sure that this thing is actually visible to you guys, and you can see that what's actually happened here is that in the very beginning, I've got the state where I opened up my image, and it simply opens it up and it gives this top state right here the name of the image that we just opened up. You'll also notice that there is a little brush that's sitting right next to this that's got an arrow that spins back to the left. This is actually an indication of a history brush. We are going to use that guy in just a second. So then to get rid of this dust right here, and this is pretty wholesale slaughter on this, but again, we're going to refine this in just a second. You have got this top layer selected that's actually active. I want you to come up to the filter menu and come down to noise. And then under noise, in the middle of this, you want to go to dust and scratches. So again, you've got this copy made up to the filter menu, down to noise, down to dust and scratches, and let go. And a dialog box will actually open up. If you come over here and you click on this area right over here, you can actually, you'll get the preview of where this is actually supposed to be. I want you to zero out your radius and your threshold both. So drag threshold all the way down and drag radius all the way down as well. And you should see all of your speckles of dust. All of that part should actually be in there. So then what I want you to do is select radius and make sure that it is active so you can see that number 1. You can't get to a 0 radius. It's always going to be at least 1 pixel. pixel. I'm going to use my up arrow key. It's just an easier way of doing it than trying to change the numbers in here. And I'm going to continue to bump this up until I get rid of the dust and scratches. Now, before I do that, I'm going to go back down to 1. You'll see that I've got a particularly large piece of dust right here. I may not do this so aggressively that I get rid of the real anomalies. Like there may be some giant piece of dust. That's the only one that's on your entire image. You're not really looking to get rid of that guy in this move right here, but you are looking to get rid of the real general dust. And so in this case, even though this guy is bigger than most of the other guys, whatever, I think I'm probably going to have other dust on my image that's at least as big as this guy right here. So I am going to be aggressive enough to get rid of that guy. So again, with my up arrow keys, I'm just going to start hitting the up arrow key until that guy disappears. And for me, it disappeared at 9. That's where I lost mine. Now, a lot of times in this case, because of my screen redraw time, I'll actually drop this back down to an 8. Or to a 7 and see if I'm actually getting this guy back or not. If you've lost track of where that big dust spot is, you can use your preview to come on and off, and you can see that I've actually come down to a 7 and it is still gone. I'm going to continue down to a 6, and again, I'm looking at my 6 right here, so it's still gone. I'm going to come down to my 5, and at a 5, I'm beginning to actually pick that guy up again. I'm just barely being able to see that guy right there. So I am going to go back up to a 6. Then you want to take your threshold. So what Radius is doing is it's looking at the, it's running the filter on this, but it's saying, how big of an area do you want to do this on? So the really little baby spots of dust got picked up in a 1 or 2 radius, but these bigger ones, you need a bigger radius to actually cover that entire, because that piece of dust is at least 12 pixels wide. So I need that to be up here at this scale right here. Make sense? But then what threshold is that threshold is looking at the dust in my image and it's saying, how much difference in tone am I going to say is dust? So this is on a scale of 0 all the way up to 255. If you drag this thing all the way up to 255, it turns the entire filter off. Because basically you're saying anything that basically I need a difference. Basically the only thing that this would impact would be a speck of black dust, pure black dust on a pure white background. That is the only thing that's got 256 levels between the two that would satisfy this threshold requirement. But what we use threshold for, and this is especially important for you film scanning people, is this is what restores your grain. So you actually start to drag this up as high as you can get it before the dust appears again, and it will start to restore your film grain, because this is going to step all over your film grain as well. So again, I'm going to drag this all the way down to 0. Again, it is active, so I'm going to use my arrow keys and I'm going to start tapping to raise it up. And what I'm trying to do is see where it needs to be, where I begin to pick things up again. And you can see that here at a threshold level of 8, I've started to pick up the scratch again. I've also started to pick up a couple of dots of dust. There's one that's happening right here. So it's too aggressive, so I need to back it off. So I'm going to drop it back down again to 7. I can still see that scratch. Down to 6. I can still see that scratch. Down to 5, I can still see that scratch. Down to 4, it's almost getting there. And then finally down at 3 is when I lose that final scratch. So in most cases, a lot of times, guys, when I'm doing this stuff, my threshold, I usually am able to get up in the 20s a lot of times. So it's an image by image basis thing. Does that sort of make sense? So in this case, then I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. And you take a look at your image now, come over here to the side, and you can actually take a look at the guy's face and turn this, the eyeball of this on and off, and you can see, oh, that didn't do any damage to that image at all. Perfect, and you're good to go. Yeah, no, you don't believe me, do you? Of course you don't believe me. You shouldn't. That's just horrible. It's destroyed this image. I mean, totally. If you back out of this and you take a look at it, oh, this is art. No. You can see it just completely fucks your image up, which is not what you want to do, right? So here's the trick. If you look over here at your history palette, I want you to click and make a history snapshot. And what it's doing is, so if you click on this and call it dust and scratch, and say okay to that, you have actually got a state now. This history state is what this image looks like right now, with all of the dust gone, but it's completely blurred like this. This is a history state. I'm actually now going to go back in history and select the duplicate layer. So it will undo the history. It's going to undo that dust and scratch. And you can see my image is sharper again. But I do have a history state. I have a version of what this image looked like when it was all blurry and all that dust was gone. Does that make sense, everyone? So then you need to put you do not, everybody look at this screen really quick, because if you fuck this up, it won't work for you. You don't want to pick this state. That is not what you want to do. Instead, you want to click on this little box that's to the left-hand side. So I have not picked the state. I did not go back in history to this. I'm still on my duplicate layer. If I had picked the state, this image would be all soft and blurry, and I wouldn't have any of this dust. That's not what I want to do. I want to put that little check, that little box right there. I want to put that little icon of the history brush right there. So with the history brush, that actually is a brush, I'm going to zoom into my top here just a little bit more so that I can see it. We'll leave it big, sort of big like this. So this is my screen. I'm at 100% here. Come over to your tools palette, and on your tools palette, on down here, it's right underneath the clone stamp tool is the history brush. And if you click on this drop-down menu, you will actually, or the little fly-out right-hand corner part, you will actually get the history brush. You can see that there is an art history brush. So if you're really shitty as an artist, just pick the art history brush, and it paints art history for you, and you look great, and its life is one. And then you just go on, and you're fine. No, don't pick the art history brush. It does really weird shit to your imagery. You want to pick the history brush, though. Now you've actually got a brush. So again, it works just like a normal brush. It's actually got everything about a brush that you could have. So if we come up to our drop-down menu here, I'm going to go ahead and make this a completely hard, well, I take it back. I'm going to give this a medium hard brush. I don't want to overspray anything. I don't want to overspray. However, and this is the trick. This is the thing that makes this so good. This is the thing that film people start to get weepy about when they see this happen. You want to change the blending mode of your brush. In the click down blending mode of this brush, from normal, you actually want to simply change this to lighten. And when you do that, what I am saying here is that I want to paint with this version of history. This version of history, this scratch did not exist. However, it also had softened up the whole image that is around it. By changing my blending mode to lighten here, it will not change anything except the individual scratch. That is the only thing that gets changed. And you can simply click on this and drag across it, and it gets rid of the scratch. You can sort of like come across, and you can actually paint all of this stuff out, and you're not changing anything. You're not sampling anything. You're not using the clone stamp tool. You're simply painting away the dust. So that's a pretty good trick, right? Oh, but Verser, can't you make it better? Can't you make it faster? Because that's pretty fast, right? Yes, I can. Hit Command Z to undo that. Grab your lasso tool, the L key, and draw just a really big area of this. Again, you don't want to touch the guy, but just grab this whole big area right here. So I've got a big hunk of this image that I want to actually remove the dust from. And then simply come up to the Edit menu, down to Fill. In the menu that opens up, change the contents to History, and change the blending mode to Lighten. And say OK. And you just removed all of it from a giant area, but you didn't soften anything else up. This maintains the integrity of all your film grain. It's a killer. And it's fast. Command D to deselect. Go back to your history brush to make sure that that is selected. I want you to zoom into this guy's chest. You'll actually see that there's another scratch that's running right down this guy's chest. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. Again, you don't want to hit this any harder than it needs to be hit. But if you click and you drag down across this, you'll actually see it does a shockingly good job of removing that scratch, and also the one that's sitting here and the one that's sitting here. So you're painting through this stuff, guys, as quick as you can, and it's not having any impact on the rest of of your image. You're not softening everything up. There's another scratch that's running right down here on this line right here. So all of this is working really well. Everything is perfect. I love this until you get all the way over to the girl's shoulder. And if you come over to the girl's shoulder and you actually look at, you look where they're actually holding hands. So you look right underneath it, you'll see that there's a little speck of white dust down here. Now, all of the people in this room who actually scan film, you know this to be true. When you scan dust, dust on a white background shows up as white dust. Dust on a black background shows up, dust on black background shows up as white. Dust on a white background shows up as black. You always end up getting the inverse of whatever it is. So in our case, if you come over here and you want to get rid of that small speck of dust that's on this girl's sweater or shirt, whatever, and you click on it, you see nothing changes. And the reason nothing is changing is because we have our history set to lighten. This thing is already light. We need to make it darker. So you come up to your blending mode here, and instead of lighten, you come up and you change it to darken. And then you come over there and you hit it and it's gone. This will change everything for you. The dust that it used to take you an hour to get out, and now take you 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Wow, that was worth showing up today, wasn't it? Are there questions about this?
Should you play with the hardness of the brush? Because like I see mine is a little like soft around that area.
It's such a great question, Connor. I am constantly modifying the hardness of my brush. If I do that more than any other thing that I do in Photoshop. I mean, you guys see this. I've been having this conversation. I am constantly up there changing it. And oh God, no, that's a little bit too soft. Or no, this is too big. We've been using really big brushes here. I would actually go to something that's a little bit smaller. If I was working with if I could work with a tablet, the strokes of these are really easy and fast. So I can use extremely small brushes, and I usually hit them really well. So it's awkward for me to try to do this with a trackpad, but absolutely yes. And if something doesn't work, if you hit that mark and it doesn't work, simply go back in history. Going back in history works in this whole history thing. So if I wanted to bring this guy back, again, Command Z brings the dot back, change the hardness of your brush and hit it again. Yeah, constantly. Are there questions about this? Are we good on this?
Did you take that photo?
I did. Yeah, this was when I was trying to get out of shooting nudes for Playboy, and I started shooting there. They had licensing deals with everybody, and so I told you guys about how you do tracking shots. Yeah, I think I pulled you in a chair doing a tracking shot, didn't I? Yeah. So the way. Yeah. So this is actually. This is, if you take a look at this, this is actually in. It's in Florida, and I want to say it's the northern part of Dade County. It's where you can actually drive on the beach. So we have a car on the beach, and you take a regular C-stand or a pick stand, whatever, and you put it in the trunk of the car, and you jack it up so that it holds the trunk of the car open. And then I climb into the back of the car, and my assistant drives the car down the beach, and they're running behind me, and I'm just bang, 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 bang. And you can do it forever. If I wanted them to have the ocean in their background, whatever, they come around to the side of the car and they just continue to run, and I'm shooting across into the ocean as the background. But it's great because you can go on until you run out of beach. People do it on the street all the time. I do the exact same thing on the street. In some cases in New York, it's harder to do this. So in New York, we use what's called a doorway dolly. Do you know what are you guys, anybody here do any film? I know Henry does some film stuff, but professional film set, they have these things that are like, it's like a very low platform on wheels. Well, here, I'll show you what one is. Because we don't have time to get started. Well, we'll take a look, maybe we do, but. This is a doorway dolly. All of these are. And so basically what happens is that one of these sets of handles comes off. The photographer sits there with a tripod on the dolly itself, and one or two assistants either pull it or push it through the streets. And I've been pushed all over New York. shooting this way because it works really well. Even on cobblestone, if you're down in Tribeca on the cobblestone streets down there, it works really, really well on that part. It doesn't bounce too bad. So it's a way that you can really control framing and focus. It's really hard. I mean, if you've ever tried to do tracking and walk, because people do this. I mean, they really do. They'll sit here and they will actually bring a camera up like this and they'll walk backwards like this, but you're bouncing the whole time and you're trying to, and so usually if I'm doing that, if I have to do a tracking walk like that, you have an assistant hold your back as the whole ways you're going. You don't, go over the edge or trip over the curb or any of that kind of stuff. Skateboards work really well to do this with. Little red wagons work really well. Wheelchairs work really well. Anything that's got wheels that will allow you to pull back works well. Skateboard is really tough to do on cobblestone. Wheelchairs are really good because the wheels are really big. It absorbs a lot of that. But anyway, that's how you do it, or how I did it. Okay.
Would you be doing these manual then, focusing?
Oh, no.
Because that sounds terrifying.
It is, although this was shot with manual focus. This is so old. This is really before autofocus became a thing. It really is only 10 till, right? Okay, yeah. So we're going to look at something else really quick. Autofocus changed my life. But I actually used to work, this is actually shot 35 millimeter, but I would say that 90% of my work was shot with a Pentax 645 and a 400 millimeter lens. Everywhere. 400? And the range of focus of that, I said this to a camera tech once. I was like, why is the depth of field drops out so fast on this stuff, whatever? He goes, shitty optics. But at any rate, everybody shot with this. Everybody shot with that setup. Bruce Weber shot with that setup. Stephen Meisel shot with that setup. Peter Lindbergh shot with that setup. Everybody shot with it. Because you could get, the reason it was such a long lens is that you could get such incredibly shallow depth of field, the backgrounds would just blow out and you could really isolate figures from it, and that's why we all did it. But trying to focus that shit when people were moving or that kind of stuff was an absolute nightmare. There was no autofocus at all. And again, you're on, if you were right on the eyes, you were in focus. If you were a quarter of an inch off, if you were back focused or front focused, literally the size of your eyelashes, whatever, the whole image would be soft and unusable. So yeah, it was the bane of my existence. Anyway, really quickly, let's look at another image. We're going to start the process really fast, and then we will come back from lunch. And I don't know what to say about these tablets, guys. We'll see what we can do and see if we can't get stuff to work. So if you take a look in your System 7, there is in your assignment folder, let's not go there. Let's actually go to, there's a image down here called Skin Eyes Retouch. If you can double click on that one and open this guy up. We're going to have a quick conversation about this and tonality, and then we will take a break for lunch and we will come back. And we're going to go deep into retouching when we guys get back from lunch. There's one other file I need to find really fast.
Where was that first one?
It's in your Session 7 folders. All right. So if we take a look at this circle, does that circle have any dimension to it at all? No, it's just flat, right? Does that have dimension to it? Or the illusion? I realize that this is two-dimensional frame here. It's not like, oh yeah, my God, that's coming out to get me. No. But it has the illusion of dimension. Why? What is the difference in this and that? Shading. And when we say shading, what are you really specifically referring to?
Values of light and dark.
Shadows and highlights, right? So if you're ever trying to give something the illusion, the fact that I've got a highlight on this side and a shadow on this side gives that illusion of dimension. right? So we can use that in retouching. So just so that you guys keep this in the back of your mind the whole time, I'm actually going to get rid of this. And I want everybody to zoom in to the pimple on this girl's chin. Why do I see this? Shadow and highlight. Exactly the same thing that was on the illusion of the sphere that I was actually looking at. It is a shadow and a highlight. So now, some of you guys may have the ambition to retouch professionally in your careers. Some of you not. Some of you guys may have an ambition to actually shoot beauty work. That's usually a very common thing for fashion photographers to do as well. Again, not that you have to. This is not, the conversation we're going to have right now is not restricted just to beauty, but it's a perfect example. It's a place that you can see immediately the impacts or the effects of this. And what we've got here is, how would you guys get rid of this pimple? You can go ahead and say it. You would either use the clone stamp tool, or you would use the spot healing brush tool, or the pick it yourself healing brush tool part, whatever. We're going to look at all of those guys today. That's how everybody would go after this. However, if you are doing really hyper high-end retouching, there is a problem with that. So the retouching that we're going to look at 2 or 3 examples, ways of retouching today, or ways to think about retouching. But you have to understand that retouching and the levels and the approaches that you have to it are inherently dependent on ultimately the outcome that you want to get out of it. And so I'll put it to you this way in a very sort of succinct way. If you said, a friend came to you and said, oh my God, I hear you're a great retoucher, you did Verser's class and he taught you all this amazing shit, and will you retouch my pictures? I will pay you. And I would say to them, okay, fine, how much? And they say, I've got 8 images, fashion images, outside, full length, and I can pay you $50 to do all 8. I would grab the healing brush tool in a heartbeat, and I would smack the shit out of that stuff so fast, and I would hand it back to them in 15 minutes worth of work, because that's what $50 is worth in my life, and say, here you go. And I wouldn't think twice about it. However, if somebody brought me this image and it was L'Oreal and they said, we've got $20,000 for you to retouch this image, I would not spend 15 minutes doing it. I would spend a month working on, well, not a month. I would spend a couple weeks on it though, right? And what I would do is what I'm going to show you guys when we get back from lunch. So what we're going to keep in mind here in this is this. Oh, here, let me actually give you, yeah, we'll wait when you get back to lunch. I'll see you guys at 1.